Have you ever really stopped to think about the food on your plate? I mean, the whole incredible journey it takes. That entire system, every single part of it, is built on one huge assumption, that our climate is stable. But what happens when that very foundation starts to crack?
Right, let's get into it. The thing is, the entire global agricultural system, the one we all depend on to eat every single day, was designed for a climate that frankly just doesn't exist anymore. And that puts our food supply under a whole new kind of pressure, something we've never really seen before.
So this really is the big question, isn't it? How does a warming planet actually change what ends up on our plate? Because it's not as simple as things just getting a little hotter. The reality is way more complex, and it affects everything from the size of a single grain of wheat to the actual nutrients inside it. And this is probably the most important thing to get right from the start. This is not some far-off problem for our grandkids to solve. The impacts are happening right now. And they're tricky. They're not straightforward at all. Some effects can even look good at first, but they often hide a much more complicated and worrying truth.
This is the number that's driving everything we're about to talk about. 1.1 degrees Celsius. That's roughly how much the planet's surface has already warmed up since pre-industrial times. It might not sound like a lot, but this one little number is the engine behind all of these massive changes.
So, let's start with the very air our food grows in. We all know that more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is what's causing the warming, but it also has this very direct and kind of weird effect on the plants themselves. It really is a double-edged sword.
And you can see that paradox right here. On one side, hey, more CO2 can act like a fertilizer, right? It can make some plants grow bigger faster. They call it the CO2 fertilization effect. But, and this is a huge but, that extra growth comes at a price. The plants are basically bulking up on carbs, and in the process, they become less nutritious.
And these numbers, well, they show you what that actually means. At the CO2 levels we're expecting to see, staple crops like rice and wheat could take a major hit in key nutrients. We're talking about 6% less protein, 8% less iron, 8% less zinc. For the billions of people who rely on these foods to survive, that is a massive, hidden threat to public health.
Okay, so that's the chemistry of the air. Now let's talk about the physical reality on the ground. The most direct hit to our crops comes from what I call the squeeze of extremes. Basically, all the wild changes happening with heat and with water. Take this number, 35 degrees Celsius. That's about 95 degrees Fahrenheit. That's not just a really hot day for us. For maize, corn, one of the world's most critical crops, it's a danger zone. Above this temperature, the plant's pollen can literally die, meaning it can't reproduce. No reproduction, no corn. And that heat has a direct, measurable cost. For every single degree Celsius the planet warms, average maize yields drop by a jaw-dropping 7.4%. It's a brutal, direct relationship. Warmer planet, less food.
And of course, it's never just about the heat, is it? A warmer atmosphere holds more water, which basically puts the entire water cycle on steroids. Now, that doesn't mean more nice, gentle rain for everyone. No, it means the extremes get more extreme. We're talking longer, harsher droughts in some places, and then insane flooding downpours in others.
This all kicks off a really nasty, vicious cycle. A recent paper in Science put it perfectly, saying that climate change makes farming harder and less productive, which in turn forces us to use even more land, more water, and more fertilizer just to keep up. It's a dangerous feedback loop.
Now, on top of the direct weather hits, you've got all these other biological threats waking up. A warmer, wetter world, it turns out, is a paradise for all the things we don't want in our fields. We're talking pests, diseases, and supercharged weeds.
And these threats just pile on top of each other. You've got insect pests moving into new territories. Fungal diseases like wheat rust are having a field day. Weeds are becoming tougher and outcompeting our crops. And even the soil itself, the very foundation of farming, is getting cooked, losing its vital organic matter faster and faster. Okay, so we've got nutritional decline, heat stress, chaotic water patterns, pests, bad soil. When you add it all up, what does it actually mean for the bottom line? How much food are we actually losing?
This number is just staggering. A major study calculated that since 1961, our global agricultural productivity is already 21% lower than it would have been without climate change. Let me say that again. We've already lost over a fifth of our potential growth. That's food that was never grown, that never made it to a table.
And if we look at the big four, the crops that give us 2/3 of our calories, you see how it plays out differently. Maize, as we saw, is incredibly vulnerable to heat. Wheat also gets hit by heat, but that CO2 fertilization effect helps it out a little bit, maybe. Rice and soy are a bit less sensitive to the heat, but they have their own unique problems. Every single one of our staple crops has its own risk profile.
And all of this leads to a scenario that keeps climate scientists up at night. It's called a multiple breadbasket failure. See, our whole global food system has a safety net. If there's a huge drought in North America, we can import food from Europe or South America. But as climate change starts to sync up these extreme weather events around the world, the risk of all those breadbaskets failing at the same time, it goes way, way up.
So yeah, the picture is pretty challenging, but this is not a story about doom. We are not just passive victims here. The final and most important part of this story is about how we fight back. The conversation is now all about how we adapt and build a food system for the world we actually live in.
So what does that look like? Well, it's an all-of-the-above strategy. We're talking about breeding new types of crops that can handle the heat and the drought. It means rolling out smart, water-saving tech like drip irrigation. It means completely rethinking how we manage our soil to make it healthy again. And it means giving farmers the absolute best weather data possible so they can plan for what's coming.
And in the end, it all comes down to this one question. We built this amazing, productive, but incredibly fragile food system for a planet with a stable climate. That world is gone. The challenge for all of us now isn't just to make a few small changes. It's to completely reinvent how we feed ourselves for the new reality we're living in.